Welcome, everyone. This is the inaugural webinar for our virtual learning series, The Elements of Rockstar STEM Teaching. And Dyane Smokorowski and I are your hosts, and there's our wonderful faces. I'm the 2011 Connecticut State Teacher of the Year. I've been a high school physics teacher for 20 years, all at the same school, Bunnell High School in Straford. And my partner in crime, Dyane Smokorowski, is the 2013 Kansas State Teacher of the Year. And what a cool title that she has, the Technology and Innovation Lead Teacher. I mean, like, you just can't get any more cool than that. So our whole purpose for this workshop tonight is to introduce you all to what we've been doing as part of the NNSTOY and Voya Fellowship. And so for about 2.5 years now, we're technically in year 3, the National Network of State Teachers of the Year, along with Voya Financial, has partnered to learn and talk and investigate factors that lead to effective STEM learning. And so right now we're in our 3rd year, and our cohort of STEM fellows is made up of a combination of over a dozen state teachers of the year from around the country and over a dozen early career educators who were identified by a state teacher of the year as someone that had high potential for a STEM teaching career. And so for the past 2 years, we engaged together and learned together around some guiding questions. So one of them was, how can professional learning opportunities be transformed to empower STEM teachers with the skills that they need to create a robust learning environment? The second question, what changes could be made to teacher training and professional learning that would directly lead to increased interest in STEM careers among our students in our classes? And then the third question is what brings us into year 3, which is, what are some activities or learning programs that would lead to these outcomes? So in year 3, what we are now doing is running a virtual learning series, and I'm going to hand things off to Dyane to talk us through what our learning goals are for tonight.
And with that, it's just been such a wonderful joy to work with all these other educators. As a technology, I actually come from ELA, where a lot of folks in the group come from math, tech, engineering, and so working around with other teachers to really talk about what's possible has just been such a joy. So tonight, we're going to do some more talking. We're going to be talking and learning about teaching characteristics that impact our students' STEM learning experiences and why they may be hard to teach a teacher to do well. So we want you to think about what are those elements that might be tough for other STEM teachers to learn. And then we're going to set up some quick norms. If possible and safe, try to have your camera on. We'd love to see you and have you engage with us today. Every question is welcome in the chat or with the mic. You can just pop in and interrupt us at any time. It's an open conversation policy. When you're not speaking, go ahead and mute just for that courtesy of everyone else. And we're not doing all the work in here today. We're going to be putting you into small groups to break out and have some conversations around a couple of topics. And believe in participation in virtual space is needed to make this time valuable and equitable. So we value you. Excited to have you with us. So from our first little opportunity here in the chat, tell us where you're dialing in from today.
And this is Angela. I'm dialing in from New York, and I'm with Voya, and it is wonderful to see all of your faces. So thanks for letting me be a voyeur and just listen in to this great session.
We are a fan of Angela's, my friends. So Angela has been just such a supporter of this whole fellowship the last 3 years, and we are honored to have her with us. So one thing we noticed is if you'll go up and actually click where it says participants, you're going to have the ability to raise your hand, ask questions. But if we could just open that up real quickly, if you can find the participant button. Let's give Angela a high five. If you could do that for me, just go ahead and press that button. We're just going to give her a high five today. It's where it asks a question. There it is. We are a fan of yours, Miss Angela. Thanks for joining us tonight. Okay, we've got folks from all over. We're hitting every time zone, I think, here today. So glad to have you with us.
All right,
Miss Kristen.
for the people that just joined us in the last 3 minutes, as you are telling us where you're dialing in from, if you could also pop in your email address, that's the way that we're going to send you your certificate of completion for this first of our webinars. So in our journey together with our Voya STEMs, one of the questions that we had to start with for ourselves in terms of thought processes, even before we could get to talking about what professional learning could look like, what changes could we make, we first had to think about what is a really excellent, robust learning environment for STEM. And we all know that teachers and our teaching skills and pedagogy are at the heart of that. So what I'd like you to do for a moment is think about this question on your screen. When you envision what we are referring to as a Rockstar STEM teacher, what characteristics of personality, pedagogy, what do you see in them that they exemplify that makes them a rock star? So we'll pause for a minute and give you a second to think that through, and please drop your comment into the chat box. Shake it up. I love it. Embracing change, taking risks, learning from struggles, working hard, learn with laughter, working hard. Stepping back and allowing student exploration. That's an excellent thought. All right, not afraid to admit failure. Oh, passion for your subject, connecting with students. These are really awesome ideas. And the great thing that I love about this is the fact that so many things that you folks are putting into the chat box right now are things that we, the STEM fellows, found out when we went out and surveyed teachers that were in our sphere of influence. So Diane's gonna flip us to the next slide. And all of the STEM fellows went out in our first year working together and surveyed educators that were in our sphere of influence. And these are hallmark characteristics that sort of embody everything that we were told by the educators that we surveyed. And so it spans the range of things that people here put into the chat box. Student-centered, embracing change and hands-on learning, things about how you design a classroom, promoting failure, being vulnerable, being passionate about things, student voice. All of these things were things that educators told us. So the next step of what we were looking at is to say, okay, well, if these are the characteristics that a lot of people are telling us that this is what they envision when they see a real rock star STEM teacher, that's a lot of things. I've been teaching for 20 years. I know that in my early career, if I looked at this, I'm like, whoa, I cannot do all of these things. So if we wanted to look at some of our questions about how do we help retain early career educators? How do we help prepare educators? How do we nudge our veteran educators forward? We have to first think through which of these are the most important. And so Diane's gonna flip ahead one more slide. And I'm gonna pass things off to her while I pull up some stuff we're gonna use in the chat.
Okay, so I need you, and some of you on your phone, so maybe you have to zoom in just a little bit. Thinking of which of these do you believe are the most important? So we're going to give you a moment to take a look at that. And she's actually going to push in the chat a Google form. It's in there now. If you'll go ahead and open the chat if you haven't already and click that link, it's just a real quick opportunity for you to go ahead and make your selection. Which of these do you feel are the top 3 most important?
All right, our responses are rolling in. I've got 3 so far. All right. We have 18 participants right now. And just another
recording. I'm interested to see if they have ideas.
That if you've joined us in the last couple minutes, go ahead also and drop your email address into that chat box while you're filling out the survey.
Yeah, it's hard to only choose 3, isn't it?
It is.
There's no wrong answer here.
Ooh.
So what's bubbling up to the top?
All right, so I'm gonna pull this off now. Dyane, do you have to click on something so I can screen share, or am I all good? Am I good to
stop sharing, and then it's all you to do your share?
Fantastic. So for the most important, what we've got here right now, let's see, we've got 11 people responding in. So let me pull this up for us. And that's my phone in the background, we can see. All right, so, all right, sharing out. Okay, so we've got 5 people: build a positive classroom culture, 4 designs excitement, 5 academic risk-taking, 4 people inspires curiosity. So we've hit on a lot of great things. Ooh, no rocks the boat. We don't like empathy, but we like promoting failure. 4 C's. All right. So that looks like a pretty good survey. So now imagine that you were approached by one of our fellows and you had to go ahead and fill this out. So basically what we went out and did is we surveyed over 400 classroom teachers, over 50 administrators in K-12 settings, both building level and district level administrators, and about a dozen university professors. Showed them the same list and asked them the same question. And Dyane, I'm going to toss it back over to you to put up what all of those people reported out for us.
You bet. And what comes back our direction is, let me get that where you can see it, is these came up. Between the teachers and the administrators, these are what bubbled up as what they felt was most important overall. With that thought, if one of you would like to unmute your mic, is there a thought that surprises you here?
I remember when we first discussed this, I'm still shocked to see encouraging risk-taking on both lists, because many times as a teacher, I don't feel my administrator appreciates my willingness to take risks and wants to kind of squelch that because it might lead to failures and having to deal with that.
Rachel, were you going to add something? Or someone else? If you'd like to unmute, you're more than welcome. We'd love to hear your input.
I was just glad to see that engaging real-world research was on both, because I feel like when kids understand the why, they're more into it than if they just feel like they're learning for a grade. So I was excited to see that was on both lists.
And that's a really great point. It was actually something that was brought up in the Twitter chat. We held about the same topic on Monday night, that idea that the question I think that was asked was, what really gets kids curious in your classroom? And this idea of a real world application as opposed to learning something for a grade was something that was batted around a lot in our Twitter chat on Monday night.
Interesting. One more thought? Anybody else? Miss Erica, I know we've welcomed you earlier today. Do you have a thought about some of these?
Sorry, it took me a second to get unmuted.
It's all good.
You know, it's interesting because I look at these and the thing that surprises me the most is that I see these as things that administrators would probably say about all content areas, not just STEM. And I feel like so many of these things, I mean, maybe not the real world research, you know, I think STEM, you know, is kind of unique to that. But it's encouraging to me, and it's also sort of surprising. And I could echo what the gentleman said about encouraging risk taking. I know when I was in the classroom, I had a lot of really kind of skeptical administrators. They came around in the end, but they certainly were skeptical.
Beautiful. Thank you. Jessica, would you be comfortable with sharing? If not, it's all cool. And Kristen, what was really surprising to you about all this?
Well, actually, before I get to something that I thought, I want to comment on something that Michelle just wrote, that the point about curiosity and inquiry, that in some districts, lots of teachers are faced with this idea that in order to be equitable and good, everybody needs to be on the same page the same day, because things are related to needing to pass a test. And that's something that I agree, Michelle, that's a huge hurdle. To Dyane, to your question, and to Anthony's point earlier, it was encouraging me to see that teachers and administrators on the whole felt that the same things were very important. I personally was a little amused that the administrators and higher ed people focused on knowing the 4 C's. You know, and my personal lens of that is that sounds very like, yes, that's a very foundational thing, but in terms of pushing an educator to be super rock star, that's not what really comes to mind. But I loved that teachers said being a champion for kids and positive student relationships. And I know, and I believe that in my own classroom, what gets me to pull kids in and be able to do really awesome but very hard, challenging work are the relationships that I take the time to build with them from day one in my classroom.
Perfect.
I found it a little interesting that, like, nobody really talks about, like, the content.
Right? Isn't that interesting?
You know, like, here we are, we're STEM teachers, and, like, in order to be a rock star, if you don't have the content, I kind of feel like you're a pretty sucky teacher. I'm sorry, but, like, so are we just assuming that that's, like, pre-existing? I don't know.
It's a great
question. And I think that maybe the answer is yes. I think that when we talked about characteristics, that we were asking the question a lot in terms of what would you see in the classroom, perhaps in a more pedagogical style, as opposed to maybe not taking the time to think through that obviously deep content knowledge matters. And I think at the same time, I do remember having a conversation with an administrator that wanted to like chat with me after we had done this survey, to say like how interesting the characteristics were, because they themselves have been in hiring experiences where someone has awesome content knowledge but really does lack these skills. And that's the difference between the administrator keeping the hire or letting that person go at the end of their first year or two of teaching, and that it comes down to skills. And sometimes I think that the principal that I was having the conversation with thought through the lens of the skills are like these innate things that I feel like I can't teach a teacher to do well, but with time, or if I gave the proper professional learning, maybe they could learn content a little bit better. But that some of these skills, like, yeah, I don't really know how I would mentor a teacher to do that. And that actually would dovetail us into the next part of our conversation.
Can I say something real quick? So I'm a fairly new teacher. Well, I guess my 8th year now, but my first year teaching physics, I knew no physics, but I had those skills. And so I've kind of felt like I was learning with the kids. I was learning it probably like the night before the kids did. But you can learn the content. I think the content is, anybody can do that. I think it's the rest of this stuff that makes a teacher a rock star educator. It's not the content. It is how you teach the content, and it's how you connect with the students and how you get them interested. I think that's more about what being a rock star teacher is all about. Not necessarily the content. I mean, that's important, but I think anybody can learn that part.
And Haley just agreed with you in the chat box that teachers are masters of learning. We can all learn content. And yeah, that's how I had to live through my first 3 years of teaching also. I remember the first time that I had to teach AP curriculum, and there was content in the AP curriculum I hadn't seen in a class in over a decade. And I was the same thing, reading through the book, learning the content, and the kids knew it, but we worked through it together, and it was okay because I was taking a risk and there was things that I didn't know. And then to someone's other earlier point in the chat box, I failed a lot, and I needed do-overs, and so do they. And when you teach something like physics, it's kind of like, yeah, everybody needs a do-over, and can I get one? Because I screwed up big yesterday and I need to do this again. So is learning. Anthony, yeah, modeling how to learn is an effective teaching tool. Absolutely. Jessica, I think if you have a good administrator, some of these skills can also be taught. I'm so glad that you said that. And that brings us to the next segment of our learning together. All right, Dyane, go one more.
So, because we had a pretty good conversation, our next topic was shifting your thoughts just a little bit. Going back to this list, what is to teach a teacher to do well? It's a whole different mindset. So thinking about those early career teachers or somebody new to the STEM content, or just new to the profession. It might even fall in that. We've mentioned how this is true in many of the disciplines. Which do you think are the hardest to teach? There's another form that's been pushed out into the chat. So go ahead and take a click on it, and let's see what bubbles up out of the group. The toughest to teach someone to do. And I have a feeling that your teacher prep program was similar to mine, that I wasn't taught any of these things. I was a teacher prep program. Except that I think they kind of mentioned, the idea of building classroom management with a little bit of climate, but PBL or the ideas of real world teaching, real world connections, some of those things were just not taught. They were things I had to figure out or had a mentor teacher to help me with. What about you, Kristen?
Yeah, I agree. I think that there were some things that I remember being able to learn by watching someone else do it. But then there were just things that, like that idea of willing to be vulnerable, like that's a personal choice. And I think that is something that never occurred to me early on as something that I could teach someone else how to do it. That I could model being vulnerable in my classroom maybe, but to think through, like when I host a student teacher, there are certain things that, you know, and I think back to before SEL had become such a buzzword, that there's a lot of things on this list that I think sometimes to stereotype a STEM teacher, particularly in high school, you're thinking science or math or upper level, that there is maybe a stigma against some of these things, that I'm not into the touchy-feely things, I'm here to do content. And so if that's the mindset of the professional, a lot of these things I think can be really tough. So
Okay.
let's flip.
Stop sharing so you can pull up the responses.
All right, so here we go. Is that sharing now with you guys?
Yes.
Perfect. So we can see encourages academic learning and risk-taking is really hard to do. Willing to be vulnerable is really hard to teach someone to do that well. Promoting failure, classroom relationships, elevating voice. Yeah, that's hard when you're the adult and you want to be there and the students take over. That could be messy. Embracing global connections, that could be a tough thing too. Yeah, so this one, willing to be vulnerable, right up there with risk taking. Yeah, both of those things go together really well. All right, so now let's see what our over 500 survey respondents said.
We're popping it right back in here. Sharing.
I feel like you need the Price is Right music or something.
You know it, buddy. Okay, here's what came up. The hardest to teach a teacher to do well are up to the top. Kind of interesting. And many of these match what our people had said, which I think is really interesting. Mm-hmm. Carolyn, if you feel comfortable, if not, that's fine. If you want to unmute your screen with the little microphone button, what do you think? What surprises you here? Or Miss Sydney, what do you think?
Cindy, you really hit the nail on the head with your comment that vulnerability and being a sign of weakness is tough. Could you speak a little more about that?
It doesn't matter if you're a new teacher or you're a veteran teacher. Allowing students and administrators to see you in a vulnerable position can be viewed as being a weak teacher. And teachers are not willing to show that side, at least very many of them.
And that seems to go along with what Michelle wrote in the chat box. Yes, especially when your eval could be at risk sometimes.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Who else would like to unmute their phone or their computer and throw your idea out in the mix? What surprises you here?
Well, I don't know that I was very surprised by anything, but I feel a lot of these. I think a lot, I've only been teaching for 6 years, and sometimes it's really scary to rock the boat. Like right now we're going through a standards debacle in my district, and I'm trying to rock the boat, but I'm also trying to not lose my job. Being vulnerable with kids is a little bit easier for me since I'm closer to in age to them, I think. But a lot of the things from admin and teachers are things that I think, even as I've been in this group and have been working really hard at these different Rockstar characteristics, they're still really, really scary sometimes. And it's still hard, even though I know they're important, to continue doing them. So
I love that. Thank you. And it is hard. You were like, how far can I push the envelope? Just a little bit, right? It's a big question. Miss Sydney.
Erica. This is Erica.
Go ahead, Erica, please.
So, one of the things that I'm noticing as I'm looking at these things is that, these are things you say that that are difficult to teach. And I think that one of the reasons that they're difficult to teach is that these are not necessarily things you stand up and do a PD on. A lot of these things are things that have to more be mentored. They have to be observed. These are things that you learn over time. And for most of the professional development that we receive as educators, a lot of it is done in a one and done situation. And I think that a lot of these are things you have to learn by being alongside someone who has these characteristics. So you can observe them, and then kind of attempt them with support in your own space. And I think that's one of the reasons that these are so hard.
I love what you said there about the characterizing a lot of the PL or PD that we get is a one and done. And this idea that perhaps when we are inducting newer educators, that mentor, that role model, that sharing a classroom side by side for a longer period of time than the 8 to 12 weeks, depending on where you are and in what state, that you get as a student teacher, as a pre-service educator. Imagine if we had, apprenticeships in teaching and what you could learn or do, or to have true job embedded professional learning, as opposed to shut the whole school down for a day, teachers learn something, and then the next time you do anything with professional learning is 6 months down the road in the future. So I love what you just said about that point, that it's a skill to mentor and to foster.
Beautiful.
Haley, how many of us had teachers or mentors who showed this to us? So yeah, how did we learn it? Where did we pick it up?
It's a great question. Whoops. Okay. Shall we just go ahead and pop on this, Kristen?
Yeah, well, I think we're already well into talking, if you go back one quick slide, why they might be difficult to hone. But I'd love to hear, to build on Erica's comment and the larger discussion of what professional learning might help here. Mentorship is absolutely crucial. Michelle wrote that in the chat box. But beyond a mentorship, what are other people's thoughts?
I like mentorship, but the beef I have with mentorship all the time is a lot of times it just takes the form of having conversations. And you're not given time to go into your mentor's classroom and just watch what they do. Because I forget who just said it, like they didn't know where they picked up these traits. And I know it, I picked it up from seeing other teachers do things. And I went, that's what I want to be. That's what I want to do. And I took that. And that's how I infused that into my teaching. I didn't have somebody tell it to me. I didn't have it taught to me. But it was those moments given the chance to observe different teachers. And my first position as a gifted support instructor, I got to watch a lot of teachers. So that really gave me that opportunity to see all that and steal as much as I could.
And I want to pull in the point that Debbie just made. Going into other people's classrooms can also serve as non-examples. That's equally as important. Cameron brought up the point too about co-teaching and whether or not people have opportunities for that. Michelle, can you talk to us a little bit about what you mean when you say change our vocabulary?
I had an instance, I put it in the chat box, it's a little weird, but we had a cross-discipline conversation, and I had a new teacher that was working through 2 disciplines to talk about STEM. She had a hard time doing it, but she was rocking through it, and really a STEM conversation with cultural heritage and all kinds of different things. And she was absolutely dressed down. Just, this doesn't work, this isn't. And it took a while to be able to help her kind of illuminate and talk about the ideas that she had. And I think sometimes we get bogged down in an idea and we're not able to always verbalize it correctly. And I think some common vocabulary and strategies really help that. and it helps to support all. We've started using a new term, well, maybe not new to you all, in our district called CER, which is claim, evidence, reasoning. You know, it's not new to me, but it's very much used across the board, and it can be used in lots of different contexts. But I'm finding that our visiting teachers and our new student teachers don't know it. And we make the assumption that people understand what we're talking about. Sometimes we have to go back and talk verbiage and our vocabulary, our ideas come forward. And we have to learn vocabulary changes. And I know it's a very simple, more and more as education evolves and changes, that in reality, risk-taking and empathy and vulnerability mean lots of different things to lots of people. And to verbalize that, we need to be able to use lots of different ways to do that. Lots of words that both we understand. Does that, I don't know if that's
no,
understandable.
Absolutely. And to your point, Rachel just put in the chat room about acronyms, that perhaps sometimes we all use acronyms and assume other people know what we're talking about. So we're here and, you know, we're, okay, CER, we quickly explained it, but even from state to state or county to county, people assume certain things about words and acronyms and how things are done and used. And what that leads me to is I wonder if on this list, when an administrator is answering this and looking about promoting failure, and a teacher is talking about promoting failure in their classroom, I wonder if that's the same thing. If what an administrator is thinking and envisioning and what a teacher is thinking and envisioning are the same thing.
I think that's part of it, Kristen. I really do. I think that we need to come to common understanding about how we're talking about it, so that when somebody's in your room, or you're not at two ends of a spectrum because you have a different definition or understanding of what something is.
Mm-hmm. I personally got a big chuckle the first time we looked at this list, that on the teacher side, that it was highly valuable but difficult to maybe convince someone to rock the boat. But administrators and higher ed people didn't really seem that they were either interested in terms of it being highly desirable, but also didn't really want to touch it with in terms of hard to teach someone to do well. So that was something that I got a chuckle out of.
I found it interesting that promotes empathy was on the administration side, not the teacher side. I don't know if the administrators empathize with the teachers or if they were worried that the teachers weren't empathizing with the students, but that is important, especially if students are struggling and feeling like a failure, that you empathize with them and can meet them where they are, so they don't drop out of or think they're no good at STEM. So it's just interesting that it's on the admin side.
What do you folks think about the fact that the collaboration piece is on both lists, that it's hard to teach a teacher to collaborate well with colleagues or organizations or businesses? Now, each of those things is its own unique bucket. What are your thoughts about that, this collaboration piece?
I'm just going to say I live in that space 90% of the time. So I am biased, but I think it's huge. And I think that we need to remember that sometimes it's just about the ask. The worst you can get is no. So why not ask? And if one department says no, then you go to the next. And, you know, I think the professional learning on activities for kids, we want real world application, but don't we want that for ourselves in professional learning too? And that's how we grow. So I think we need to make those connections with PD that allow us to do the same things that we're asking for our kids to do within the setting we teach. And some of those pieces are very important. And going to come up again in one of these webinars because it's that important. Just saying.
Cindy, I see that you put in your comment about perhaps connecting with businesses is not in an educator's wheelhouse. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
That's one of those deals where it's not in your training to reach out. And I like what was said, that it might just be about the ask. If you just pick up the phone and you try to make a connection with an organization to give your kids a real world example, they may be jumping for joy that someone is interested in what they do and can bring what their expertise into your classroom.
Ooh, and Haley, I'm really intrigued and would love to dig a little deeper into your comment that if you have to admit you want to collaborate as a newer teacher, then you aren't any good. Could you speak a little bit more to that point?
Yeah, for sure. I think collaboration makes it sound like, oh my God, I need help. That's not what it feels like anymore. And I think that part of becoming a better teacher is realizing, oh my God, I need help. Not, it's a different pressure on different words there. But I think that specifically collaborating with colleagues, and especially in secondary, everyone, I think you mentioned this earlier, Kristen, like, it's like, I'm here to teach, blah, blah, blah. And then we're in these separate rooms. My school has 3 separate buildings on campus. Like, it's hard to get to each other. And so if you're taking the effort, like, I need some help, I need to collaborate, see what they're doing, it can be really intimidating as a new teacher to ask someone for help. And now that I'm, 6 years in, I'm seeing it more with our first year teachers that come in. They don't want to help because they're like, I got this. You can have faith in me. I've got this. And we're like, no, we know, but you also need some help because we also all need help. So I think that's one of those things that can happen sometimes.
And Katie, your point that there's a big difference between collaboration and another meeting, that hit a chord with me because we're arguing right now in my school district about what PLC time really is. And is PLC time for us to collaborate, or is it time for us to do work for the district? And Katie, to your point, another meeting. It's important for teachers and administrators to realize that there's a difference there. Oh, and Michelle, your point, getting back to organizations and businesses, sometimes dealing with something small is an easier starting point. That's a really good piece of advice.
I think there's enough conversation about these conversations around making these partnerships with businesses that I'm excited we're going to have another webinar just on that coming up in this spring. So if you're enjoying this now, friends, we're going to give you more resources, or I wouldn't say we are, other people from the teams are going to be giving that.
So that point, do you want to flip to the next one?
Yep. So here's what kind of cross-referencing everything in the data. These are the 7 items that bubbled up to the top of the list. These are the ones that we have identified are the ones that can move STEM practice from good STEM teacher to a great STEM teacher in the teaching field. What do you think about some of this, friends? Miss Angela, I mean, I know that we haven't, it's been a little bit, but what do you think about this? Which of these really excite you?
Well, all of this really excites me. You keep trying to put us on the spot with all of these amazing ideas and to ask us to just streamline. I think for me, one of the things that's really just always so exciting is the building the classroom culture and this positive student relationship. I just think back to my own experience and how when you've got that environment where you feel safe and where there's no such thing as a stupid question and teachers who really care to know and understand their students, what a difference that makes from a learning perspective. And so that's one of the things that always really is exciting to me. And then I think always it is that promoting failure, because I agree with what someone else I think wrote in the comments earlier, that you almost have to reprogram yourself to accept that failure is not some kind of character indictment, and that it is actually what helps us grow and learn. But it's especially for an overachiever, it's something that's really hard to stomach sometimes. So that's why I think it's just so fantastic that it's one of these characteristics.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Anyone else like to unmute? If you haven't had a voice in this today, we want you. Go ahead and unmute and share what surprises you or intrigues you about this list. How might it move your STEM teaching from good to great?
Well, I'm going to jump in while other people are gathering their thoughts to build on what Angela said, in that this classroom culture component, and I'm speaking through the lens of a high school physics teacher. Everyone, you know, when I go out and I socialize people, oh, what do you do and this and that or whatever, and if I'm with an elementary teacher, oh, that's so great, an English teacher, oh, good books, and I teach physics. Oh, I didn't like that class. I never took physics. That was hard. The whole laundry list of things about why they can't do it. They didn't like it. It was impossible. Their kid's going to be bad at it because they were bad at it. I have heard it all. But that's what comes into my classroom. So kids are taking physics because they have to, because kids, I need it for college. If you asked every single child that comes into my class, why are you taking this? My guidance counselor told me to. I need it for college. I need it, whatever. It's an AP class in my class rank. But what I do in my class, it's hard. But everyone should be in a physics class. And I really believe that. But I have to make it an inviting environment. I cannot encourage my kids to take risks if I haven't taken the time to build the culture. I can't make them ask questions and do the hard learning and stick out with me if I haven't done the classroom culture. If they fail once and want to sign out of my class, it's because I haven't built the culture. I have to be willing to rock the boat on their behalf, and we got to do it together. And so, Angela, to your point, that's where I personally see the foundation of a lot of this. And I think it's something that, as a mentor teacher, I don't see that we help pre-service teachers practice how to do that. In my personal experience, and I've mentored probably 8 or 9 pre-service physics teachers, they come to a pre-established classroom. They don't start from day one, first day in August, and figure out how to do it on their own. They walk into my room. Or Michelle, I know you have a student teacher, right? Like, so they came into a pre-established set of routines and things. And so that's hard to learn how to do because you've never done it before. And now all of a sudden you're a baby year 1 teacher, and maybe you're a career changer and you're 40 years old and you're going, ooh, I don't know how my mentor teacher got those kids to do those things because it looks so easy. But yeah, it looks so easy because wow, did I put in a lot of time in days 1, 2, and 3 and week 1, 2, and 3 to get my classroom the way I wanted it to feel, so that I could teach them electromagnetic induction and they would stick at it with me when it got really hard.
Okay.
Kristen,
oh, go ahead, please. Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to jump in. I know one of the things that you were saying about like the reasons why kids are afraid to take our class, or, you know, the things that they've heard about, you know, different STEM topics, is because so often there's this lack of why do I need to know this? What is the real application? So that exposing students to real world STEM is so important because of that fact that they need to see like the real application to this. What am I going to actually do with this? How does this have to, do with the things I care about. So that's what sets apart somebody who's a rock star, is if they can really take the time to figure out what their kids care about and make connections with the content.
Fantastic. Absolutely agree. Cindy, what were you going to say?
I have trouble with this mute and non-mute thing.
You're doing great, babe.
Sorry. The whole idea of creating a classroom where kids are allowed to fail is so foreign in many schools that it's sometimes harder for a teacher to establish that kind of an atmosphere in a building that doesn't really encourage it. So whenever you do this, if you're in a building that encourages that mindset, you have it a little bit easier than if you are with an administrator that doesn't want to see that happen, because all they're concerned about is how these kids are going to do on the AP test at the end of the year.
That's definitely, again, it comes down to that administrator, if they get the understanding of what STEM really is or not, right?
Right.
That's interesting, and I appreciate that. Also want to point out, Amanda, thank you. I really liked your comment here about so many STEM things going in the classrooms that are labeled as STEM, but they're just kind of cute categories. As I coach my teachers in my district in Kansas, I've kind of told them, if I see spaghetti and marshmallows one more time, you gotta go beyond that. I don't want to see tall towers.
I love also your point, Amanda,
How
that
do we solve real world issues?
the final product is unknown. It couldn't be known from the start.
Indeed. Just so great. Okay.
Can I jump in?
Absolutely. Jump in.
Hi, this is Alice.
Hi, Alice.
Hi. I work at a STEM school, and I find the collaboration with colleagues, organizations, and businesses to improve student learning is a huge one. We have created a advisory board that is made up of business partners, local business partners throughout the area that are mostly STEM-based companies. And we make sure that we have quarterly meetings, and we make sure that they contribute to our whole culture and atmosphere at, with the students. So we have lunch and learn sessions where the students will come during their lunch period and listen to the STEM professionals and talk about real world things that they're doing, and kind of get the kids to make a connection with the real world, because they all are learning the same thing. They think they're all learning the same things in the same environment and don't value what it is they're learning until they speak to somebody outside of the building. So we often have to, connect them with people outside of the building so they understand what they're learning really is important, because everybody beside them are learning the same things because it's a STEM school. So I just find the businesses to improve student learning and the real world connections is definitely important, along with the other things, all very important things.
Do you find that having, you said that you have an actual board that does this, did you find it easy to grow it, or did you find it slow in the beginning and then it kind of took off? What would you say was the trajectory of what you've been doing there?
Yeah, our advisory board, it has changed over the years. These are actual business people who are very busy, and they want to help out in the community. So we, on a consistent basis, keep consistently about 10 to 15 advisory board members. And it does mean constant contact with them and engaging them, because they really do want to help. And it's really important for us to keep a pulse on what happens outside of the building. You know, as educators, we tend to get very engrossed in all of the educator stuff and forget that the world is changing around us. So we really use these business partners to keep our ears to the street, so to speak, so we understand the things that are changing around us and we can change along with them.
Cool. And what do you find that in your experience that a business person is looking to get out of the partnership with a school?
Well, first off, a lot of these businesses have initiatives to help the community. So they have those initiatives within their company. So they look to satisfy that. I mean, that's the non-touchy-feely part of it. That's the business part of it. But they also do get something out. They also find that it's kind of like an employment pipeline. They look to employ these students later on. My school is kind of young. It's only on its 5th graduating class right now. So our first graduates are just graduating from college. But the idea is also that they're growing these STEM professionals, and hopefully, and they're investing in them. So hopefully one day they'll be able to, enter this, STEM arena and be contributors to it. So they look to do that, and they really do enjoy coming and helping the kids. They help us. We have competitions. They're there for judges, and they often have money that is associated with their company, again, that they have to give. They have to have a certain amount of giving to the community and education. So sometimes they do funding for us and things like that. So that they look to get out of it to get students that may be marketable employees for them in the future. And they also get satisfaction in helping out in the community.
Where's your school located?
New Haven, Connecticut. We're part of New Haven Public Schools, but we're located in West Haven.
I need a teacher field trip to come see this. It really sounds amazing.
Well, and all right, so transparency and full disclosure, Alice used to work at the same high school as myself and Rachel.
Very nice.
Yeah, I miss her terribly.
I miss you both.
Okay, we have just a couple of minutes, so I think we're going to just jump over this one here and say thank you for email address in the box. Please go ahead and do so. We'll make sure you get a certificate for attendance here today. And we encourage you also to start following the hashtag VoyaSTEM. That is where all of our conversations are being posted on our Twitter chats, as well as information about the upcoming webinars. Which, by the way, Ms. Kristen, what's coming up next?
So we have these 7 Rockstar characteristics, and we have some ideas about how to build these skills, because we know that they're really important, but they're hard to teach a teacher to do well. So our series of learning for the rest of the spring and to the beginning of the summer is 1 virtual workshop every other week about one of these 7 characteristics. So our first one is coming up, exposing students to real-world STEM research and problem solving. On the Monday night, March 16th, again at the hashtag VoyaSTEM, we will be having a Twitter chat about this topic, and then our virtual workshop corresponding to the same topic will take place on Thursday, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern. And then we follow that pattern every other week from now until the beginning of June. So this is our entire schedule. So if there's a particular skill or topic or thing that you are interested in learning more about and participating, each of these workshops will be led by a group of 2 to 4 of our VoyaSTEM fellows. They have been working on these topics and building these ideas around professional learning now for about a year. So we're super excited to share out with people. So again, the Twitter chats are on Monday nights, and the virtual workshop series are on the Thursday nights. And as you can see that there's that little blinking red light over there in your corner, we will be recording all of the virtual workshops, and then the links will go up on NNSTOY's webpage, and we'll also put the links to the recording into the Facebook group event. So please feel free to share out the information with your friends and colleagues. And when you have given us your email addresses, so we'll be sending that the Zoom link to you automatically for the next one, please feel free to forward it to your colleagues and have them join the conversation.
Thank you, everyone. We hope you have a great evening and keep rocking it. Have a great night. Thank you.